Hey there, welcome back to STRonomics, or as my wife calls it, STRonomics. Kenny, what's up?
No mix. Yes. Not
So
much.
today's title of the podcast is Can You Make $500,000 in gross revenue on one short-term rental?
Boom. Yeah, it's actually a funny story real quick. So I'm on Facebook and in one of those generic Airbnb groups, and this person was like, "Hey, is it possible to make 500K on an Airbnb?" And you wouldn't believe how many people were like, "No, that's not possible. That's like literally like insane, and like there's no way that can happen." And like a couple people were like, "Actually, like I'm doing that on my property." And people were like, "No way, show us your financials." Like it was like started this, argument in the comment section. And I'm sitting there going like, it's totally possible. What are these people talking? They don't know. They're not looking at any data. They're not looking at
Because they
any.
have limited beliefs.
Exactly. But which made me like, so many people were saying it. And it made me realize I was like, let's talk about it. Like, is that even possible? What does that look like? How many I've seen them, and we're gonna go over some examples. I mean, you're witnessing one, or two in real life. And so we'll talk about those properties, but I mean, we gotta break through, shatter these beliefs, or disbeliefs.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. The two OBX properties that I'm a partner in, we're just shy of tracking $500,000 each. We're right around like 930, 940 on our tracking, is what it looks like when we're going to come out of June. Now, that does not include future revenue. So, I mean, when we look at July, we're I think at like 3,500 bucks a night, 3,400 bucks a night, and we still have a few dates open in July that I'm pretty confident will end up getting booked. But it's also I think it's a very challenging thing to do in year 1, Kenny, but if you're really good at doing direct bookings and bringing guests back, it's easier in year number 2. And I think a prime example of that is the Arkell brothers in the mastermind. They've got a $4 million property on a lake in Wisconsin where, not there's not enough people, honestly, in my opinion, that understand like Minnesota and Wisconsin and the value of those 2 states, especially from the mid to the northern part. So I don't know if you know their numbers or not. They did like 880 in their first year, which ends like literally right about now, maybe next month. And they're pre-booked for 2025 over $1 million. So they're literally averaging like $55,000 to $57,000 a week during the summer months for them, which starts around Memorial Day, runs all the way through about the middle of September. So if you do the math on just on that like 13-week run, remember I'm a college dropout. I'm not that smart, but I'm going to pull out my trusty calculator. 13 times just 55,000. That's 715 grand. Just during the prime summer months, right? So they've gotten really smart. And I think the ones that are generating a lot of money are pretty creative in what they're doing from their pricing and their conversion and marketing to where they're renting like for corporate meetings and stuff, like a day and a half rental, right? Which is like super smart, specifically during the week at like $5,000 to $6,000 a night for a day and a half, right? And they're filling gaps when they would probably have to drop down to like the $2,000 range, maybe even 1,700 by packaging something that nobody else has. Hey, you can come and arrive at noon, host your meeting, stay through 5 o'clock the next day, right? And they're jacking up the price like I do on my 321, or people should be doing on their 321, and then, or even upselling gap nights. So I think you got to get a little bit creative in doing that. But you also got to be in the right market to be able to do that, right? We have a mastermind member that has 5 properties owned and co-hosted in Palm Springs. They're all doing well over $500,000 a year in revenue. They're actually almost all they're right around between 800 to $1.1 million a year in revenue, single family homes. But he's got like fucking Disneyland in his backyard in every one of them.
So, number one, being in the right market. So, like, there's a formula to this, right? So, number one is being in the right market. Okay, where properties can do that.
Can't do that with a 4-bedroom townhouse in downtown Nashville.
No.
Probably can't even do 100 grand, actually.
No, you can't. So, number one, being in the right market. But the Arkells, there are plenty of examples. I found a property doing $1 million in the middle of Vermont, with not near a ski resort, literally in the middle of Vermont, like nowhere. And it was like an 800 acre, estate with an 8-bedroom house that had a 9-hole golf course, private golf course, 2 lakes, like 20 miles of hiking trails, ATV trail, like just like anything outdoors you could name it. And it was making over $1 million a year on Airbnb. Like
Well, you know
it was
Jeff
an 8 bedroom.
Usner, right? Jeff Usner, who owns STR Digital, he's in our war room, right? Guy's got like 4 properties. They're all doing over $500,000 a year, but they're like those big farms and stuff like that that have all the attractions.
So that's the second thing, right? Because these properties aren't necessarily in markets like Palm Springs or, I'm sure like there's probably some properties in these big, maybe, yeah, I would say probably Orlando, big popular markets where you kind of shoot at the hip and say, yeah, something could do 500,000, some big, massive resort kind of style property. But the reality is there are a ton of properties that are doing that, like the Arkells, Jeff Usner's, this golf estate, in the middle of Vermont. They're in markets that nobody's ever heard of before.
They've created the destination, which
Exactly.
is a very hard thing to do in this space.
Yep. And so you've been to the Arkells. What specifically did they have there? It's a brand new construction, obviously, but like
brand new construction, 20-bedroom primary house, multiple game room areas, movie theater, all that stuff. On their second floor, they had, 3 washers, 3 dryers, like in its own closet. Massive. You remember the Gatlinburg place we went to for the Gatlinburg meeting? Like they had like a massive, dining area, family room, kitchen, all to where we could get, I think we had 52 mastermind or 53 mastermind members that were there. We could all be in one room, which you know how challenging that is, right? At the big places that we go to. But they also had a full 2-bedroom, 1 bath with laundry, with kitchen, with a sitting area and a loft guest house that they built, a cabin. That's where Chris and I stayed. And it's not like far away. It's literally like 50 feet or 30 feet from the house, but they had a pool, they had a fire pit, they had a fireplace all covered with soft seating, 2 hot tubs, a huge outdoor kitchen area with a pizza oven, which was super cool. So we had a pizza making contest within our accountability groups that everybody loved. They had on the water, and this scares the shit out of me, 2 pontoon boats to rent.
Yeah.
5 jet skis to rent. Like slides in the water, rope swings. They had everything, right? Now the jet skis, and they were big jet skis. They're not like little, the small Sea-Doos. They were like the big ones that will go like 80. That stuff scares me. But they had all of it. They had Andrew Keller do their photos, which are phenomenal. They ended up building a sport court with basketball, pickleball, and like a whole gathering area that's enclosed out on this sport court, right? There's nothing even remotely close except for the other property that they own about 30 minutes away, but that's only like 14 or 15 bedrooms. That's a small one.
Yes.
There's nothing remotely close to this. So it is new construction. It's designed very well. They have the most important factor, which is a water bottle filler. So I'm almost done. Bria's still down there. She'll be done in 2 days with our mega property, the 12-9, and we stole the water bottle filter from them, or filler from them. We put in 2 hot tubs, right? We have the multiple like gaming areas, game room in the basement, and then a game room upstairs, and a different like PS5 or whatever they're called station that we created, all this stuff. So I think that it is about occupancy, but for them, it's really about quality. Because they learn through their first property, which is about a $600,000-$700,000 a year property. That's number 1. And then number 2, they're going to do over $1 million in 2025. They should close out 2024 at like 900,000, right? And that's on, I think, just under around a $4 million investment. So they're operating at like 40%, net margins, or they were, to the best of my knowledge. I'm sure they still are. So what's 40% of 900? Let's just call it 400 grand, right? 400 grand in net cash. They're going to get a 10-year payback, on their $4 million investment. For most people, it's, oh, well, Bill, you say you got to get a return in 5 years. For most regular properties, but when you're cash flowing that much, that's a great return. So remember, as you get into bigger properties, cash flow increases, return, diminishes.
They're refinancing, they're leveraging, like, you know what I mean? Like it becomes like I like what you said there too. And that's really, really, really important. the more expensive the property, the more cash flow you're going to want. And the less cash on cash becomes, important. So it's like, look, I'd rather have higher cash flow than just a great cash on cash return. You know what I
100%.
mean?
So it was like when John Hodge joined the mastermind, right? And he came in, and he was kind of the one that started 30% cash on cash, the whole first year of the conference, right? When he joined the mastermind, he wouldn't do anything at the time for less than 40% cash on cash.
Right.
But literally, this was in the middle of COVID, 2022, essentially. And every single property that he owned was a 1 or a 2 bedroom, and mostly in Memphis at that time, right? So a little bit different. You better be doing at that time 40% cash on cash, because you're only going to be doing $100,000 in revenue, and you better have been picking those things up for 2 or 300 in Memphis, maybe probably 150 to 200, in Memphis. But you jump up to $1 million properties, you get up to $3 or $4 million properties. I'm at this $3 million purchase I'm making. I'm not going to do 30% cash on cash. I'm actually going to be fine on a 10% cap rate, on that. But the one thing that concerns me about some of those outlying areas with those big properties, let's use the Arkells as an example. Are they going to see appreciation? Or did they build at the top of the market? Right. And that's what I don't know about that area, like on their Spooner Lake. And I saw what was around that lake, but that's where I think doing research on appreciation is critical in your asset class that you're developing or you are purchasing. Because if they have stagnant or 1% appreciation on a $4 million purchase there, versus if they can go to a different market and get 5 or 6%, that should impact the performance and the investing decisions.
Yeah, and also it's commercial, right? So if they can increase the revenue, that can also, in a bank size, increase like kind of
I
force.
don't know that. Do you think somebody's going to buy a single family home like that, even though it's massive, and trade that on NOI? I don't know. I don't think an astute investor would, because they're thinking about their exit, right? I think a less experienced investor, they probably could position that to come in and base it on NOI. I would never do it because I don't know that I would be able to exit on that type of a conversion.
That's such a good lesson. Like, you know, this idea of like model the master, like see what people who are doing at these higher levels are doing, and how can we take lessons from that and what they would or wouldn't do and apply it to, where we're currently at. Meaning like, so let's take a turnkey property that's for sale right now that somebody's selling. That's I every time I talk to people are always telling me like, I'm like, what kind of property you looking for? They're like, it'd be great if it already had bookings on Airbnb. And I'm like, like paint the perfect story here. But I'm like, look, if you buy a turnkey property, most of the time, unless it's a person, that it's at the top of the market, you're buying it at a premium. And I tell people all the time, don't become someone else's retirement using your retirement funds.
Unless you buy one or both of the ones I have for sale right now that are at the top of the market.
Yeah, there you go. So like, but it's the same, but it applies even at this higher level. You know what I mean? Like what you just said and like the thought process there, it can be applied to us who aren't at that level yet.
Every single investor, Kenny, should be thinking about their exit when they're underwriting the purchase. Every great entrepreneur, I've done 34 startups. I'm thinking, in probably the first 5 to 7, I wasn't thinking about exit, and I had to be taught to think about exit. Every property I purchase, I'm thinking about exit, right? Because I'm trying to sell properties as quickly as I can, and I want to maximize at the right time, and that's how I level up. The only way I can get a $3 million property is by selling other properties, or I have to put more cash into, my portfolio, which everybody should know I don't do. I don't want to do that. I don't use other people's money. I just grow my own. Right. So I think that you said the biggest thing, the right market is critical if you want to nail like all 4 levers of the investing strategy. And there's a reason when I bought the previous 2 biggest houses, the ones that are getting close to 500,000, they are both within 3 miles of each other in the Outer Banks. The Outer Banks is notorious for big beachfront properties generating massive cash. Now, when you come in and you force the appreciation and you can outperform them by remodeling, redesigning, doing all that stuff that we see standard, but at a much bigger level. Like we put in an average of $460,000 into each one of these properties, to renovate them on those projects. And, I think I would almost guarantee, unless something happens to the economy, the following year they'll break 500. We might end up between 450 to 500 this year, and because of the return bookings. And I think that's also where the legacy markets. That's a great thing for the Arkells. There, it's not a legacy market, but it's an old school mentality in that upper Midwest where people go back to the same spot for family reunions or whatever year after year. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand as well, to be able to do big numbers like that. Very similar to what I've done at Dragonfly, right? That should be 175 to $195,000 a year property, and I've broken 330 both years that I've owned it. And but a lot of that's the return guests coming back because of that 200-day funnel, right? So I'm getting that stuff booked in, and I think people don't understand the value and how hard it is for new customer acquisition. So when you look at these older legacy markets like Vermont, I guarantee you that guy has a very high return percentage
Oh, easily.
of people
Easily.
that are coming back
Yeah.
year over year. And that's what you really see, I think, with a lot of those successful properties that aren't new construction, basically from North Carolina all the way up to Maine, right? And you see those traditional markets. You see it in Michigan, for those old school legacies. I think you see it in Minnesota. You see it in Wisconsin, especially in middle to the northern parts. I'm seeing it in Montana this year, right? As I dive into my second summer season, even though I didn't rent much last year, but as I get to know hosts that are there and do meetups there, a lot of them see the same thing in that type of a market. So you don't see that as much down in the Panhandle or the beach or Orlando anymore. Those are kind of nouveau riche, at least that's what I call them, markets. So part of it has to do with market selection as well. I believe that where I invested in the OBX for Zach, my business partner, and myself, there was this small strand of about 3 to 5 miles, and that's the only place I was going to go. I wasn't going south of it and I wasn't going north of it. Right. And you could see the opportunity inside. And I think a lot of people, just like we talk about, oh, well, you did that in Vermont. You told me about that one house. I can go anywhere in Vermont and do that. That's not the case. You can't go anywhere in the Smokies. You can't go anywhere in the Gulf. Cape Sandblast is completely different than 30A, which is completely different than Miramar. Right. So I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about. It's the underwriting process, it's property selection, it's market selection, it's all that type of stuff on the front end.
Yep. I agree. I love it. And creating too, like, that experience at the property. You know what I mean? Like, they almost, like, these people, they've made a traffic driver at the property. And it's got to be pretty big. You can't just be like, oh, I put it in an arcade in a game room. That's the traffic. That's not a traffic driver. You know what I mean? Like, it's something unique experience that that property can offer.
100%. Let me just talk really quick about the 12-9 that Bria is going to finish in 2 days, right? So it's great. It's got a fire pit, seats 24 people. That we did the interior dining, blah blah blah. It's got 10 arcade games in it and a papa shop, whatever. But here's the deal: just like when you and Emil found Banner Elk for me, because I'd never heard of it before, this will be the largest property to sleep the most people. It's going to have high end design. It's got all the amenities. It's got incredible views. We're chopping down 4 trees tomorrow in the backyard. It's the sunset is visible from the entire back of the house, right? Like 60% of the year, especially during season right now, which is the most important. I've got Andrew Keller coming in on the 27th, next Thursday or Friday, whenever it is. It's that whole thing. But most importantly, this is the only property of its kind on this lake. There is nothing else like this. 8 bedrooms is the biggest one on the lake for a short-term rental. We are 12 and we custom made bunk rooms to sleep 38 people. And I'm not talking bunks, but like if you've seen, we built in queen size beds and added bathrooms and that type of stuff. So the whole moral of the story here, folks, is we created something that did not exist on a lake that we've already proven larger properties will work on this lake. Now you couple that being 45 minutes from Birmingham, Alabama, huge metropolitan area, 45 minutes from Huntsville, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and 2.5 hours from Nashville. And that's where my buyer, Wealthy Wendy and Wealthy Walter, go. They don't go to the shitty, gunky lakes at Gunnersville and Timms Ford. They go to the clear lake, down at Smith Lake. So now I have built-in marketability. Does that make sense? That's the purchase. I couldn't do that at the lakes closer to Nashville. And a lot of people would say, hey, I want to go to, that lake that's closest to Nashville, which is Timms Ford. But it's gunky, it's dirty. People go there and they don't come back. You know, they want to find something that's cleaner, their kids can swim in, they don't get that, you know, sooty stuff on you and that type of stuff. So there's a lot of these things that play into that research on the front end, because you can't just pick the Arkells or this thing up and drop it anywhere.
Yep. I agree. I love it.
Awesome. That's a wrap. You can make $500,000 on an STR, folks. You just got to find the right market, the right one. And if you need help, just reach out to Kenny, the property finder, the property picker, Bedwell, the property picker.
Yeah, there we go. Cool.
All right, guys, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. We'll see you guys next Thursday. Happy hosting.